What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Derek and Cody, with you as always. Guys, we're still breaking down our position groups, and today we're talking about the wide receivers, where outside of the Colts fan base, feels like it gets a lot of negative attention at times. A lot of analysts try to break down this wide receiver room and say it's really not all that great. But I think a lot of Colts fans have a lot of high expectations for this wide receiver room, especially if you can figure out the quarterback situation. If you can get a quarterback that can consistently get these guys the football, these guys can do some good things. And we'll start with the number one guy in this wide receiver room, and that is Michael Pittman Jr., who has had some injuries here and there, Cody. We know last year he was dealing with the back, which definitely impacted his ability to do a lot of things. Even his rookie year, he had a few injuries here and there that kind of hindered his development a little bit. But this is a guy that has put up near 1,000 yards every single season, despite those injuries and despite the lack of good quarterback play for several years now. And has gone through two regime changes when it comes to the coaching staff. So what's your thoughts on Michael Pittman and his role in the offense?
Yeah, I mean, we know what Michael Pittman is, right? We know that he is never going to be the flashy 10-plus touchdown guy usually, right? He's a guy that's going to get a lot of targets and is going to be efficient with the football, right? And like you said, how many quarterbacks has he played with since he got drafted in 2020?
I mean, there was Rivers in 2020, right? Wentz in 2021, and then it was Matt Ryan in 2022, then Gardner Minshew, then Anthony Richardson, and I mean, also in addition there was
Joe Flacco,
the two other quarterbacks from 2022 that he played with, and then there's Flacco. I mean, yes,
at least eight. A lot. At least 8. It might be 9. I mean, Daniel Jones starts. It's going to be 9 different quarterbacks since 2020, which is crazy. So, yeah, all that to say, Derek, when you look at it, you can count more quarterbacks that have been subpar than have been even average, right? I mean, it's just to that point. I would say Gardner Minshew and probably Phillip Rivers. And Carson Wentz was kind of right there, right? But I mean, that's just 3 out of 8 quarterbacks, potentially 9 that he's going to play with that have been even average. So a lot of people like to disrespect Michael Pittman, and I think a lot of people just kind of brush off the injury and say, oh, he was not good last year. And I'm like, do you realize he was playing with a fractured back? Like, yeah, Michael Pittman might have said it's not a big deal, but for 99% of other guys, it's a big deal. They're not playing through that. But Pittman did, and he clearly was not himself. Like, Derek, we saw in 2023, Michael Pittman was having a really good year with the Colts, with Gardner Minshew, who, mind you, doesn't really throw the ball down the field a whole lot, right? And even Anthony Richardson in the time, if you remember, Derek, at times when he played with Anthony Richardson, there were some times when Pittman was able to do some things down the field. I mean, we saw it with Carson Wentz, obviously, in 2021. He's probably out of all the quarterbacks the one that threw it down the field the most and gave Pittman the most opportunities. I think a lot of people say Pittman can't do certain things, but I'm like, the Colts haven't had a quarterback who can consistently do those things. So how can you say that Michael Pittman can't do those things? Because they don't ever do those things. So it's just kind of this weird thing where I just don't understand the Pittman disrespect. And quite honestly, with that, it's just kind of ridiculous because I'm like, this dude was playing through an injury. Yeah, he's never going to be a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. He may never be a top 10. But Derek, I think he's very underrated. And I think a lot of people think he is not a good wide receiver. And I think he's a very good wide receiver. Now, is he elite? I don't know. But, I mean, this is a guy that when he's had average quarterback play, he's put over 100 catches and, 12 to 1,300 yards in those 2 seasons, right? So, what could he potentially do with even an average quarterback this year, right? I think he could sit around those numbers again. So nothing crazy, but I do think Michael Pittman is a solid receiver that you can work with. And I think if you can incorporate some of the deep passes a little bit more, I know you have Alec Pierce who can do a lot of that, but you haven't really given Pittman a lot of opportunities, right, down the field like that. But if you could do that, I think he's more than capable of doing that. I mean, we saw him in 2021, Derek, how many times when Carson Wentz threw it up to him, he came down with it, right? He had those opportunities when he did that. So I would like to see the Colts incorporate that more. But again, they have to have some good quarterback play to make that happen, obviously. But I do think Michael Pittman Jr. is very underrated in a lot of ways. And a lot of people like to disrespect him and say, oh, he's not this, he's not that. But I think you put a good quarterback in front of him and hopefully a fully healthy Michael Pittman here in 2025. I think he'll be just fine. He's never going to be a Justin Jefferson or somebody like that. But I think he's always going to be a reliable target for whoever's throwing the football. And I think that is very important as well.
Just a reminder for everyone, in his 5 seasons, again, he had the injury in 2020 and then in the injury year in 2024. So if you take what he did in 2021 through 2023, had 88 catches one year for over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, had 99 catches for 925 yards and 4 touchdowns in 22, in 23 had 109 catches for almost 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns there. So again, a workhorse guy that can get it done when the injuries are not really a contributing factor. And, again, that was also with an offense at times that was just not even close to running at 100%. If Michael Pittman Jr. is healthy, the stock goes up on Michael Pittman and what he can do. All right, moving on to the wide receiver 2. And we have Alec Pierce on the outside, who, albeit did not have a season high or a career high in catches last year. He actually had 4 more catches his rookie year than what he did in this last year, but eclipsed over 800 yards catching with those receptions. So 37 catches for 824 yards, averaging over 22 yards a catch. That led the NFL last season. Also had 7 touchdowns, which, if I'm not mistaken, yes, that did actually lead all Colts in that category. So yards, he actually led the team in total yards for the year, average yards per catch, and touchdowns last year, Cody. So this is the guy that creates the big play for you. And he does the dirty work, which is definitely something that you want. I'll be completely honest, Cody. I hope that the Indianapolis Colts can get a deal done with Alec Pierce this offseason, because I have a feeling if he does something similar this year, being very close to leading the NFL in yards per catch based on a certain number of calculations, that somebody else is going to want to sign Alec Pierce for a solid deal, because somebody else might be able to utilize Alec Pierce a little bit better than what we do currently.
Yeah, a lot of people say he's the one-trick pony, right? He's the guy that goes down the field, a vertical threat. How many times last year was it a bomb to Alec Pierce and he just outran everybody, right? He did that so many times. We saw it live, week 1 against the Texans. He goes down there and beats a very good corner in Derek Stingley for the touchdown. And, we saw it multiple times, that Jacksonville game, the first game in Jacksonville, just to name a few. There's so many more that you could point to. But Alec Pierce, all that to say, he's a one-trick pony, but that trick is pretty darn effective, Derek. And I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. You need to keep Alec Pierce around, because even if he only has, he had 37 catches, so whatever that averages out to, if he has 3 to 4 catches a game, but 1 or 2 of those are for 50-plus yards, that changes the entire landscape of the game, right? So you need a player like that who is the deep guy, right? Who, when all else fails, he's a guy that if you throw it down there, usually one of 3 things are going to happen. Obviously, it could be incomplete, or the other 2, he catches it, or he draws a pass interference flag, right? So there are many good things when you go to Alec Pierce, and when you throw to the league leader in average yards per catch, good things are typically going to happen, right? So I think, yeah, you absolutely need to keep Alec Pierce around, because, even if it is only a few attempts per game, those few attempts could completely be the difference between wins and losses, honestly. So, I mean, if the defense wasn't god-awful in that Jacksonville game, you win that game because of Alec Pierce. Like, honestly. and that Alec Pierce touchdown gave you life late in that Houston game. Like in the first few weeks, Alec Pierce was doing crazy things, right? So if you're able to, keep that up, if you're Alec Pierce, you're going to earn a nice payday with the Colts or somebody, because that is a big deal to have a receiver that can do that. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Alec Pierce is a guy you need to keep around if you're Indianapolis. He's still very young. I mean, you only drafted him a couple of years ago. So I think he's a part of what your offense can become. If you get the right guy in there at quarterback, Alec Pierce is going to be a huge piece of this offense, like he continues to be, last year and moving forward. And you want a player like that. That trick. I mean, Chris Ballard talks about it all the time, Derek. That blue chip thing that players do that makes them stand out. We know what Alec Pierce's is. He may never be the best short to intermediate route runner in the NFL, but the deep game, he's insane. Like, he's crazy good at that. So I absolutely agree with you. I think you got to keep Alec Pierce around because he has the capability to bust the game wide open.
The big play ability, regardless if it's a one-trick pony thing, he does it really well. And that's ultimately all that matters, is having a number two guy that can do one thing really well. And if they do that one thing well in the offense, that's how you utilize it. And I'm not worried about that because of the next wide receiver that we're going to talk about, because you don't need a second wide receiver that you're looking to try to get 100+ catches every year, because of the guy that I'm about to introduce, Josh Downs, who is able to take some of that production away. Alec Pierce is your big play guy, but Josh Downs is going to be the one that's going to get you those first downs. And that's what we saw last year in a lot of those circumstances, Cody. How many times did we say there was a 4th and short, 3rd and short, or even a 3rd and long, like a 3rd and 8? And we're like, Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco, nobody's completed a pass in a while. When are we going to see something happen? And then Josh Downs finds a way to get open because he is just as shifty and as good of a slot route runner as you could possibly get. And he just finds a way to get open. He creates separation, and he gets those much-needed first downs that you can count on. So he had 72 catches last year, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns last year. It wasn't a huge jump from 2023 to 2024, but you did notice a little bit of a difference, especially in the touchdown category. And in all honesty, we both can sit here and agree that the fact that Josh Downs in a 17-game season only catching 72 passes, that's, again, mind you, that's 4 catches a game, that 4 and maybe 0.2. I mean, 4 catches a game for Josh Downs is not a good number for, the offense. So he needs to be much better.
He also only played in 14 games, if you remember. He only played in 14 games because he got injured in training camp, I believe it was. So he wasn't ready for the start of the season. So that's 72 catches in 14 games?
It's a little bit better. You're right. So, I mean, that's pretty much almost 6 catches a game. So, still, I mean, the numbers need to be high for Josh Downs. I mean, I'm talking, this is a guy that can have a Hunter Renfrow type of impact that Renfrow had with the Raiders back when he was the focal point of the offense. I'm not saying Josh Downs needs to be the focal point of the offense, but Josh Downs should be a guy that you are consistently looking for a lot, because he is a guy that is going to be open. He can make plays with his feet. He just gets open and is available for you. So Josh Downs, I really hope that we continue to develop him well, because that needs to be the secret weapon for you. He's the Swiss Army knife of that passing offense.
Yeah, and he's just like the perfect safety blanket for your quarterbacks, right? I mean, like Anthony Richardson, he's struggled with the short to intermediate game. So if it's him, if it's Daniel Jones, who also has had some of that issues as well, like what better option than having this wide receiver who, routinely is getting around 100 targets per, season, and a guy that we saw at North Carolina, Derek, he was a guy that was a 100-catch guy year in and year out when he was actually playing significant snaps. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. Josh Downs is a guy that needs to be a high-volume guy, and it may never be like crazy when you look at the yards per catch, but he's a guy that consistently gets you 7, 8, 9, 10 yards, whenever you need it. And that kind of stuff is huge. The chain moving type of guy that you absolutely need and every offense needs, right? So I think Josh Downs is absolutely that guy, but also he's a guy that can go up and get it, Derek. He's a little bit smaller, than some of these other receivers, but I tell you what, man, that Houston game, that second game, you remember that Josh Downs catch?
I remember
that was crazy. So he's not just a slot. He's obviously great in the slot, but he can do some stuff on the outside too. Like he can catch some contested catches and stuff. So I think he's a do-it-all guy, like you said, and he can do a little bit of everything, which is definitely exciting. And I think every offense that, wants to thrive needs a Josh Downs in their offense. They just do. They need a guy that can go in there and consistently be open all the time, right? So, and it'll be interesting to see now, Derek, and I know we'll talk about Adai Mitchell here in a second, but with the addition of Tyler Warren, what does that look like for Josh Downs? I mean, he's been a guy, like we said, over 100 targets last year and 98 targets the year before. Like, what are the targets going to look like for Josh Downs? Because Tyler Warren also that security blanket in the middle. So I'll be very fascinated to see how this all works out because there's a lot of mouths to feed in this offense. And we'll talk about the tight ends in a later video, but I'll just be fascinated by that.
And, honestly, from a Michael Pittman standpoint too, because Michael Pittman has always been the workhorse guy. He was like the Reggie Wayne of that Peyton Manning offense from before, right? He was just the guy that when you needed a third down catch to get you a first down, that he was the guy to go to. You have Marvin for the big plays, but Reggie was more of your security blanket there. And you're right. It is going to be interesting to see how you feed all these mouths. And in addition to the next player we're going to bring up, which is Adai Mitchell, who was drafted 2 years ago and had, a lackluster rookie year, to say the least. There was a lot of high expectations with Adai Mitchell, and it just felt like it didn't quite put it all together. So he had 23 catches last year, 312 yards, no touchdowns, although he came very close to getting one in that New York game. It just never quite got there. But there were questions about, at first the things were about, his health and, we found out he was diabetic and all these other things. Was that going to impact him at all? Didn't really seem to impact him at all this year. But you saw what he was doing in training camp. I mean, he was cooking every Indianapolis corner. Even when we were doing we had joint practices, he was still cooking people. I mean, Cody, there was no one that could guard this man one-on-one. And in fairness to him, I mean, we saw it a whole bunch of times this last year where he cooked someone and Anthony Richardson failed to deliver on that front. It's kind of similar to in 2023 when Gardner Minshew was the quarterback for Alec Pierce. And just Gardner Minshew failed to realize a lot of times that Alec Pierce was open 40 yards down the field, wide open. And we had plays every single game where we were just like, hello? Like, how are you missing this all the time? And it was a little bit frustrating for Adai Mitchell, I'm sure. We mentioned it before. In that Texans game, the first game of the year, you and I went to that game. 3 separate times, Adai Mitchell would have had a touchdown had Anthony Richardson hit him on that out route. And Anthony Richardson failed to hit him all 3 times. And 3 touchdowns in the first game would have been for Adai Mitchell had Anthony Richardson been able to handle it. So that stuff happens. But then we saw, the whole, him not diving for some of the catches. Some people were saying he was making business decisions out there, not putting his full body on the line when he felt like he was going to, just get smacked. But the one thing that definitely intrigues me, Cody, and I think that will serve Adai Mitchell well going forward. After Alec Pierce, Adai Mitchell had the highest average yards per catch on the team. So that's higher than Josh Downs. and it's higher than Michael Pittman. He averaged over 13 and a half yards a catch. I think that's 2 more yards per catch more than Josh Downs, and I'm pretty sure it's about 3 yards per catch more than Michael Pittman. So you're looking at this and saying, Adai Mitchell's got the goods. Just, again, the quarterback play hurt him, but does he have the wherewithal to put it all together next season? Because we saw what he can do if you give him an opportunity.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, he was getting open. Like, he was one of the best separators in the NFL last year. And yeah, the problem was, I think at times, like you said, there were some questions on, did he go for some balls he should have gone for, all that kind of stuff. But I think also, Derek, there was times where he just wasn't in the right position, right? He needed to be a certain way and at a certain position. He just was out of position at times. So all those things, I think, are things that I have questions about for Adai Mitchell going into this year. I mean, we'll see year 2. Year 1 can be a whirlwind for some guys. Sometimes it takes them a little bit of time to get acclimated, right? So now a full off season, working with the team, working with these quarterbacks, working with Reggie Wayne, like, will that help him now in year 2 really take his game to the next level? I mean, I've said it before, Derek, but I think from a pure talent standpoint, I think Adai Mitchell is probably the most talented wide receiver in this room. I think he is. Like, I think he has the potential. Again, that's a big word that we use and throw around a lot. But I think he does have the potential to be the best wide receiver on this team. Now, potential only gets you so far. You got to go out there and prove it at some point. But I think he has the chance to this year, and he has the chance to earn, more playing time. He has the chance to be on the field more, with the Colts. But he's got to go out there and prove it because year 1 was very lackluster from him. There was a lot of things. And again, like you said, the quarterback, play wasn't necessarily a help, but, that didn't stop guys like Alec Pierce and Josh Downs, right? And Michael Pittman even to some degree. So, yeah, all that to say, it's a big year for A.D. Mitchell. He has an opportunity here to prove that he belongs in this offense and can be a future piece for quarterback this year and the quarterback moving forward, whoever that is. But, yeah, he's probably the most intriguing player on the offense for me because I just don't know what to expect. I'm hopeful that he can live up to that potential, but he's got a lot to prove.
No doubt, because there are some people that are concerned about his drop issue and, again, the inability to find himself in the right spot sometimes. But again, Reggie Wayne feels very confident in his abilities, so I'll take Reggie Wayne and his confidence going forward. Let's talk about wide receivers 5 and 6. We'll group them together here because these are a couple guys that get a few reps on offense every once in a while, but are mostly your special teams guys. That is Ashton Dan as wide receiver 5, your kickoff / punt team specialist that has been with us for many years now. And Anthony Gould, obviously, who is trying to become that punt return, kick return specialist that the Indianapolis Colts are really looking for. Struggled a little bit early last year with being able to maintain possession of some of the returns, but as the year went on and we started realizing that we needed some kind of jump, special teams unit put him out there and he started, having some decent returns. I mean, it's kind of nice, Cody, that obviously your 5th and 6th wide receivers, are playing special teams such an impact on there, but are guys that can also be utilized in situational football that can really put a spark in the offense.
Yeah, I've always liked Ashton Dan as a receiver. Like, I've always thought if he gets an opportunity, he can go out there and show some stuff, right? Like, remember in 2020, I know it's been a while now, but I remember Ashton Dan when he had the opportunity, when some stuff was going on, the Colts needed him to step up a little bit, or maybe it was 2021, actually, now I'm thinking about it. But regardless, he stepped up and he made some plays. So he's got some pretty good speed in him. I know he had that injury, so I don't know. We'll have to see on that. But I do believe that Ashton Dan can be a solid receiver. I mean, you ideally don't want him on the field for that. You want him to be a special teams guy. But he is one of the best special teamers in the NFL, and there's a reason the Colts like him and have had him around for so long because he's just so good at what he does. And yeah, and also you talked about Anthony Gould as well. I do think he has a chance here to really ascend and kind of be that primary return guy moving forward. But honestly, Derek, it's so interesting because I think pretty much out of all of the positions, there might be one or two that I would say I feel similar about, but I feel like it's super cut and dry with this receiver room. Like, we know who's going to be 5 and 6. We know who's going to be the top 4. It's just very fascinating because, like, a year ago, there were some question marks, right? We were questioning, like, who's going to be wide receiver 2? Was it going to be Alec Pierce? Was it going to be Adai Mitchell? I mean, this is like the first year where I think we fully kind of have an idea what this wide receiver room is going to look around, unless the Colts magically keep 7, which I don't think there's any chance they do. I mean, I think it's pretty cut and dry from 1 to 6.
Yeah, definitely. I think the established order of the wide receiver room has pretty much been set at this point. Again, a very young wide receiver room. I think the guy that's been here the longest has been Ashton Dan, which is pretty crazy to think about. And, he was a guy that came over in 2019. And then, one of the longest starter right now is Michael Pittman from 2020, right? And he just had his first year on his second contract. So, I mean, this is a very young group. I mean, this wide receiver room has seen a lot of new additions over the years, and it's, starting to take form. We just hope that the quarterback room catches up with it. And, honestly, Cody, I feel pretty good about, like, even some of the backups that you have at wide receiver. You got DJ Montgomery, who's on the practice squad, even Laquan Treadwell as well, who, again, was, a highly sought out wide receiver coming out of college too. Never really quite got it figured out. But, again, a guy with a lot of talent as well. I mean, the Indianapolis Colts, they do a pretty good job of being able to find quality depth on the back end of their rosters in this position. Just hoping that the rest of the unit follows suit,
And they signed like 4 undrafted wide receivers in the offseason. Like, it's kind of crazy. So they didn't draft one at all, which is like, it's weird. It was weird coming into this offseason saying wide receiver wasn't a need, because I feel like we've been saying it for like years upon years upon years. Like, get another wide receiver, get another wide receiver. And now we're like, no, you got other positions to worry about, because look how much you've invested, right? Pittman's a 2nd-round pick. Pierce is a 2nd-round pick. Mitchell's a 2nd-round pick. Downs is a 3rd-round pick. So you've made some investments, and, so far you've netted pretty good results from it. Now, again, I think what will happen, what needs to happen is you would like for one of these guys to become the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver, right? You want a guy like, if Adai Mitchell lives up to his potential, I think, Derek, he could become like one of the best wide receivers in football. But that's all in theory, right? He needs to go out there and do it. That would be the only critique, is like, you have a lot of collective, really good players, but right now you don't have like a player you're like, oh yeah, he's a top 10 guy. You just don't have that right now. You have guys who could be that, but right now it's all speculation. But altogether and all in all, Derek, it's probably the best wide receiver room the Colts have had in quite some time. And yeah, you don't have that, you don't even have that T.Y. Hilton player, right? That guy that can, take over games necessarily, but you have guys who could do that given the opportunity. You just have a lot of young guys right now in this room. And you have Michael Pittman, who you kind of know what he is. He's a solid receiver, but he's not, an elite wide receiver. So it's a good group, but what could happen, I think, what it could improve in is have a guy turn it into
we'll have to see if somebody takes over that role at some point, but that'll do it for this one, guys. That's us breaking down this wide receiver room. Let us know your thoughts on this group and your expectations for them in 2025. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for all the support. And as always, go Colts.